Being raised and born and raised in church all my life. Prior to that, though, my dad was first 30 years of his life were pretty bad. He was a drug addict, a heroin addict for 20 years. He was incarcerated for about 8 or 9 years. Just, into the Mexican gangs, the prison gangs, violence, things like that. He had a long history of his life, just kind of crazy. Then he had an encounter with God, and in 1970, his last time he got out, he had an encounter with God. From that point on, his life was changed and became a completely different man. So I wasn't around during that time, but other than hearing the stories of how my dad was, and then just kind of seeing things throughout life of some of his reactions and things like that were a little crazy because he was a totally different type of person from his background. But jumping into my background, I was born and raised in church. If any of you were born and raised in church, you know what I mean when I say you slept under the pews. And we were at church all the time. My dad was a minister. He had a prison ministry at that point. He was an evangelist, a preacher, just all that stuff. So we were always in church and involved in church all my life. I had two brothers. As well, that we all went to church. And then at some point as we got older, one brother kind of did his thing, and the other one also kind of got into the ministry as well, and I helped out in that area as well. But just to give a real quick brief description of where my background was, it was that mom and dad together. My dad, I remember him always being in church. Mom and dad never fighting. I never heard them screaming or yelling. They had their arguments, I'm sure, but they kept them private. And just all around, I have no complaints about my upbringing. It was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
No complaints on that. So I thank God for that. But I also know that that's not the norm. And maybe my kids can't even attest to the norm that I had, with my own children and the upbringing I had. So in a nutshell, that was mine. Parents were together, married for 40 years. My dad ultimately passed away from liver cancer about 15 years ago, and mom died a couple years ago. So in a nutshell, that's me. Babe?
Okay, well, I come from a family who was not attending church. And let's see, my parents were divorced, and I had or have total about 10 siblings, probably more than that. Yeah, I really don't know how many true siblings I have, but my mom had five. There were five of us, and she's the one that raised me. And I have, in my mom's family, I have one sister and three brothers, and then myself. We didn't know the Lord growing up. I guess we went to church occasionally here and there, but never really a committed life that I saw growing up. And what can I say? I seen my dad maybe every other weekend, not too much. Did not have a really good relationship with him. My mom, she did the best she could, raising us, being single, doing what she needs to do to survive and to raise us kids. So, not the worst background, but not the greatest.
And we say that I kind of want to start off with that because just to kind of show that me and Norma came from two totally different backgrounds. And so, as Norma and I became friends and boyfriend and girlfriend, it was just a whole nother world to me, seeing her side and how they did things. And I'm sure to her, a whole nother world on my side and how we done things.
Yeah.
And, just because you're Christian doesn't mean anything, doesn't mean there's no perfection, but, it is a different lifestyle. So in a nutshell, that's us, two different worlds. And then we come together and we form this crazy life for the next 35 years.
Yes, a crazy Christian life.
Yes, to boot. So any of you that are Christian, it's, we're just being real with who we are. And again, coming back to the podcast is really just to say this. Like, I remember somebody coming to me years ago when I first got married. We got married young, and he showed up at my door and was crying, and it had, I was like, what's going on? He says, well, I got in a big old fight with my wife. He's a young Christian guy too that got married, and he comes to me telling me that they had a big fight and he felt terrible. And so as I got to talk to him, I was just like, well, I mean, we fight too, and I'm trying to explain him and make him feel better.
It's
and
normal.
Yeah, and I'm telling you, well, I don't know that it's normal, but
It's normal.
It was us.
Fight.
Yeah, it was us, fighting and screaming and yelling or whatever. And he starts kind of smiling as I'm telling him this. And I'm like, well, what is the problem? Like, why are you smiling at him? I'm kind of telling you personal stuff. And he just smiled and says, man, he goes, I'll never forget it, because he said, I thought I was the only one. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget that point in my life. And I think now we come forth, 30 years down the road, and this is it. This is it, to tell people that they're not the only ones. And in particular, Christians, couples, families that argue, fight, go through crazy, wild stuff, because everyone does. But the fact that nobody likes to talk about it.
Right.
And Norma and I always would say, man, I wish somebody would have talked to us. We had instances where people would just, give little advice here and there. But even at that time, they weren't real. They didn't want to share their ugly stories and their stuff with us.
Yeah. And some of them even mentioned that. Like, I wish I can tell you everything. And I'm like, please do, because I can learn from that. But they never did.
Yeah. And so thus the podcast, where we want to be real and intimate. And I'm actually a little nervous about doing the podcast, because I think as we go through and we start to share, you're going to see emotions and disagreement between Norma and I. We probably disagree more than we agree, but we've learned to disagree and try to move forward. And again, this is not about us being at a place where we think, oh, we made it, let me tell you now how to do it. It is not that. We're not here to give advice. We're here to share things that we've went through, and hope that through those stories, you might be able to say, hey, if they made it through that, then I think I can make it through that, and just kind of stumble, crawl, fight my way through and get through it. Can ask our kids, our family, we've been through a lot of stuff. So that's the reason for the podcast today, is to really go through our lives and share some of the crazy things that have happened, the good and the bad, and just share stories with you guys. So if you watch it, if you like it, if you listen, we would really ask that you share it. If you know someone that might relate to it and say, hey, that might be kind of cool for them to hear, share it. Send it to them. You can DM us, message us. We'd love to hear from anybody and answer any questions that we could, or help in any way. So that's the podcast, Man, Wife, and Life. So Norma, why don't you start by saying how we ended up coming to meet together? Give your version of that.
Well, about 14, maybe a little bit before I turned 14, a friend of mine invited me to church. So I said, okay, why not? So I ended up going to the church that Mark attended. I didn't know at the time, but I went, and I just remember seeing all these young people there worshiping God. And I was so amazed with that, because I never saw that, or was never been in that environment of worship. And so I went, continued going, and then I actually spotted this this boy there too. And I was like, oh, he's really cute. But it was not Mark.
Come on. Cut the video.
It wasn't Mark. It was probably one of his...
No names. We're not going to give any names either.
No names. But one of his friends that I really had a crush on for a little while. I hadn't met Mark yet. And kept it on the down low for quite a while. But started going to church, and then so met his friend. And then eventually, and then from his friend, I ended up meeting Mark, which once I saw him, I mean, come on, I was head over heels over him. I'm like, forget this one. Now I like this one. And mind you, I didn't come from church. So I was like, who's cute here? And it was Mark. So that's how we got introduced by your friend.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember this, that Norma wrote a letter to me. This was back when we didn't have phones,
Yes.
guys. So
Write
I remember one
letters,
day, yeah,
pen to paper.
after church, her friend said, "Hey," she walked up to me and she goes, "Hey, Norma wanted me to give this to you."
Hmm.
And Norma was standing right
Right next
behind
to
her. So she handed me this letter. I was like, "All right, thanks, Norma."
Well, yeah, bye.
Oh man, that was so
I
funny.
was so shy.
But I did read that letter and I kept it for a long time.
Yeah.
I don't know what ever happened
Your
to
mom
it.
ended up having it, and I don't know where she
Oh
did with
wow,
it.
yeah, I had it. I kept it. So yeah, that was pretty funny. Then, and just to kind of categorize where we went to church, we went to a non-denominational church, the Pentecostal church. And so that was, for
It
any of
was
you
a dumb
again
one.
who are charismatic, Pentecostal, raised, like it's crazy, right? That's a crazy church. And I'm not saying it's bad. It's just they do some crazy things and get pretty charismatic in their praise and worship. I still appreciate it for my roots. I'm not in that anymore. That church in particular, but I still believe a lot of the things, and we just had some changes upon our life. But that was the type of church that we went to and were raised in.
Yeah, I
And
loved it.
yeah, and I hated it. I'm just kidding. I had to go because my dad was a minister, So I was a preacher's kid, and preacher's kids aren't any good. So we're too over sheltered, and it's just. And I went to private school there as well. So anyway, that's another topic.
So when I met Mark and met his family, eventually him being raised in church, and I wasn't, I just saw total perfection. I saw total perfection when I saw him and his family, because it was perfect to me, considering where I come from. So I latched on. I latched on to what I saw. I liked it.
She liked my family more than she liked me. Basically, is what she's.
His dad was amazing, and his mother too. Yes.
So, and I remember one day, I think you had already given me the letter, and we were kind of talking a little bit. And I remember we were driving. Me and my mom were driving home one day, and I saw you walking on the road. You're walking like, are you coming out of school maybe or something?
Walking to school.
And walking to school. I remember you had like this purple jacket on. It was ugly too. It was an ugly jacket, and I just remember telling my mom like, "Hey, that's Norma. Stop!" And we stopped, and she didn't want to stop, but I made my mom stop and
get me a ride.
Yeah, we gave you a ride home, right?
I was so embarrassed.
Yeah, you didn't talk or anything like that.
Mm-mm.
I think back now, I'm like, why did I do that? Like it wasn't cool at all.
I was totally fine walking to
school
by myself. Leave me alone, everyone.
And I remember vividly, you're walking with your head down.
Always with my head down.
I remember, and I was like, we got to pick her up. She looks too sad.
No, it wasn't sad.
But I do remember that purple jacket. So, anyways, my version on Norma, coming to church. How old were we? Like you were 14? So I was 15. I didn't have any. We had friends and no boyfriend or girlfriends or things like that. Mm-hmm. Just you're a kid still, right? So, and I remember her coming and just being. Once I met her, just being different than all the other girls that I was raised up with in church. And I didn't like that. I didn't like the girls from church. I mean, I had friends, but I don't know. For me, I just never really liked that part of church that was the in crowd. And those of you that went to church know what that is. And that just never really meant anything to me. I was part of that crowd because that's where I went to church. Mm-hmm. But on the other side, it wasn't, and I haven't told this to Norma. I've never told this, what I'm going to tell Norma right now. But I remember in that moment when I was young, I remember in that moment when I was young that I remember saying a prayer. I was saying like, hey, God, you know what? Would you just bring me a girlfriend? I remember praying that. But I wasn't like crying or anything. It was just a prayer I said. I was kind of at 15, kind of going to that age. Everybody's trying to have a boyfriend or girlfriend. And I remember praying. And I'll never tell you that. I remember praying.
Never heard that.
And then the next time I saw you, I just remember you vividly walking down the long aisle in the church. Mm-hmm. And you had on this dress. And I think it was your mom's dress.
Probably was my mom's dress. My mom used to go to bars and she would buy all these dresses And when she found out I was going to church, and it was a church that you couldn't wear pants to,
That's right. Yeah.
I didn't have any dresses to put on. So she let me borrow her dresses, and they were big, and but I wore them because I was serious about this God thing. And I was clueless
Yeah.
what it was about, but I wore my mom's party dresses
I
to
remember being
church.
like a teal bluish kind of a shiny
Always shiny.
dress.
Yeah.
See, I remember.
Yeah.
And I remember her walking down. I remember thinking, hey, man, I like her dress and I like her feathered hair that she's got going on, you know? This was the 80s, right?
It was the 80s. Yes.
So, yeah, I had my eye on her, you know? And then we just obviously kept on talking and getting, you know, to know each other there.
Mhm.
But yeah, that was that's how we met.
Mhm.
Then we just started talking from there, and again, there was no cell phone, so we had to call each other, you know, on the phone. I remember when you would call, I'd have this long, like 30-foot cord that would reach all the way to my bedroom.
From the living room.
Yeah, and then I pick up that rotary phone and talk. And man, the worst, because you know when you're young like that, right? You talk for hours, and you don't even really talk. You just like you're breathing on the
Yes.
phone. You know, what are you
Same.
doing? I don't know. What are you doing now? It's 5 minutes. I don't know. What are you doing? And it's like I don't know. It's kind of like today's with FaceTime. You know, I got all my kids and they just FaceTime though. Now they can see each other, but they don't even talk. They're just there and they're sleeping or they're cooking or eating
Yeah.
or something. But yeah, so we had that cord, and I think one of the worst part of that all was back then on the phone lines, like if my dad was calling and
Mhm.
and I didn't, we used to have like a two-way, so you'd get a little beep on this on the phone, and you could click over to whoever was calling. But when I was talking to Norma, I didn't want to click over,
Yeah.
so I would hear it, and I wouldn't click over. And then back then, you could actually get the operator on the phone,
Yes. Breakthrough.
and
Emergency
you do an
breakthrough.
emergency
Yeah.
breakthrough on the phone line. So you'd be talking, and all of a sudden, hello, this is the operator. We've got an emergency breakthrough call from Manny Alva. And
Yes.
oh my God, that was
That was
my
it. You're in
dad.
trouble.
Oh man, yes. Bye, Norma.
Yep.
I gotta go. And
Yeah.
yeah, he used to do that a lot, right? Because I was on the phone all the time.
Yeah.
But anyways, that was our, 15 and 14, some teenage love started teenage, liking.
Yeah.
And our church was real strict too. Like you had to sit like what, 3 feet apart,
Mhm.
3 feet apart from any boy or girl that you liked.
Yeah.
If you didn't like them, you could sit as close as you want. But
Yeah.
if you liked them, you had to sit.
You could pretend you didn't like them and sit real close to
Yeah,
them.
exactly. So it's kind of weird, but again, this is the church that I grew up in, and Norma later came to and attended. But that's how we met. So man, we've known each other for a long time,
Yeah,
a
about
long time, and then
36 years.
yeah, we just started dating. I remember the first time I went to Norma's house, I had to ride the bus, the city bus,
Mhm.
over to her house and take like 2 or 3 buses just to get to your house.
Mhm.
And we want to tell them what happened when I reached the door to your house.
Oh,
Do you remember?
I don't know if I remember what you're talking about.
When I knocked on the door and then you slammed the door on my face.
Oh, yes. I got so nervous that I fell. My mom was like, Mark's at the door for you. So she was mopping the floor, and we lived in the project. So the floor was tile. And
Projects, aka the ghetto.
so
We both lived there.
yeah, she was mopping, and the floor, we didn't have rug. It was all tile. And so I was so excited to go open the door. So the door was open.
It was open,
because
yeah.
Mom
I saw
opened
you.
it. So I went and I slipped, and my foot slammed the door on Mark's face. So that was his experience. His
Yeah.
first time coming to see me.
Seen her,
He got
and
the
then
door slammed on his face.
So yeah, I never forget that part. But yeah, then we just kind of started dating and seeing one another. And I don't know if you would say it, as we started dating progressively, that we fell in love. We have this kind of debate, right? What's your
Mhm.
opinion?
I think we did fall in love. It's the first love. Call it puppy love. I think it's a love that was developed. I mean, it was a beginning love. Yeah. And maybe partly lust because you were so sexy. So
Yeah.
maybe a combination.
Yeah, maybe so. I think coming from that, and I think the point on that is that 14 and 15, and then you start kind of being boyfriend and girlfriend, and then right, you just start doing things that you probably shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, on a serious note, with that being said, and it can, I don't know if this is a reasoning. It can happen maybe to even people that were raised up right or correctly. But I remember just always feeling wanting to be accepted, wanting to feel loved because it lacked in my home. So when I found somebody like, oh, he's interested in me and he really likes me, I was like, I better hop on board because this may never happen again. And I remember thinking that, like, this guy really likes me for me, and hungry for that attention at that time. So I did it. I just hopped on board, and yeah, been on it since.
And I think that as I look back, what, 36 years ago, and that beginning stage, that there's some really cool moments there because, like you said, it's like puppy love, first love, um, and just everything that you feel, right? The
Mhm.
innocence of
Mhm.
of liking somebody,
The
and yeah,
butterflies
all the
and
butterflies and the goosebumps and all the other stuff
yeah.
that comes with it. And I remember, sometimes when I think about it, I can think back and say, God, like, that's cool. I wish there was somehow to go back to some of those moments in life. Not that we don't have good moments, but those moments in life
Yeah.
when things were just, you're young, you're a kid, and it's just like brand new. Um, and everything's just innocent,
Yeah.
real innocent.
Mhm.
And until you start making it bad,
I do have to say, when we first started liking each other, um, we didn't hold hands for about a year into that.
Yeah.
Like, and I remember it being under a pizza box. We were so scared that maybe we would go to hell or something because we didn't hold hands. It took us a whole year to hold hands, and we were already boyfriend and girlfriend. But we always had a chaperone. We tried to do it right in the beginning. In the
Yes.
beginning, we tried to do it right. Um, so yeah, I mean, it was fun. It was
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, it was
It was
fun.
cute.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, we kept it as long as we could keep it, and
Hmm.
that was those, I think, are really just cool times to look back at and just try to,
Recapture.
yeah, recapture those little moments or think about those moments that we had.
Hmm.
Um, and then, like I said, you just become, as most boyfriend and girlfriends do, you start liking, loving each other. You start showing more affection toward one another.
Start sending flowers.
Yes, you start doing all these little
Yeah.
things, and then you just progressively go into a relationship.
Yeah.
So we go through that, and then all of a sudden we're a couple years in, and I think that's when things just start getting,
It
and
got
they,
crazy.
yeah, and I think they do
Yeah.
get crazy for most. I mean, those that have it down pat, man, kudos to you
Hmm.
that you do. But I think for majority of young, teenage love, you start to get to a place, you start to get to know one another, and then all of a
Well,
sudden,
hormones happen too. We start getting, curious and hormonal, and then when there's love tied into that, what puppy, whatever you want, the love that you genuinely, they're true feelings that you can feel. Later in life, we can say, no, that wasn't love, that was lust. But at the moment, you're thinking that it's truly love. You
yeah,
really are thinking that way. So things happen.
yeah,
Things
yeah,
happen that should have waited till after marriage.
true. And then you start fighting.
Yeah, because
All the
that
fighting starts coming
well,
in.
yeah, because you have your jealousy. Once you cross that line, like God knows what He was saying when He put that commandment in there. So when it's broken, I know with us things happened that were not good. There's a consequences, fighting, jealousy, you know, a lot of that, a lot of the jealousy and fighting started taking place
Yeah.
after we fell in lust.
Yeah. And then, well, and then what happens as most, you just all of a sudden now it's just us. Like we have friends, but it's just us.
Yeah,
We're
we're
always
growing up now. We're
together.
we're getting older, so there's no
Yeah.
more chaperones. We knew how to sneak around now at this
Yeah.
time.
I got my license so we
Yeah,
could drive.
got a car.
And then it starts to go downhill
Yes.
from there,
Yeah.
But I just, yeah, there's a lot of things. And then we really start to get into a relationship and then start, I think this is then where backgrounds and stuff start coming into
Mhm.
play
Mhm.
as, whatever might be happening in your life or
Mhm.
happen in your life, my life, not a whole lot going, but I'm trying to understand you and maybe some of your actions or reactions,
Mhm.
and I don't get it,
Sure. Yeah. You're like, what's
and
going on with you? You're
yeah.
demon possessed.
I just don't understand because I've never seen certain things or heard about certain things in that have happened in your life.
Yeah, I remember one time you telling me I never knew these things happen in families.
Yes.
Like you were really shocked and caught off, like, what did you just tell me? You
Yeah.
know, when I shared something deep with you. And yeah, you were really shocked on
Yeah, because
families
my
like that.
family was my dad just commanded a lot of respect. He earned respect,
Mm-hmm.
and I had two brothers, and we didn't fight. Like we didn't. I think my older brothers fought one time that they told me about, and I never fought. I was the baby of the family, but we didn't, yell or scream or not talk to each other or things like that. And then I would come over here to your family and they'd be fighting and, oh, I haven't talked to him for 6 months or her. And I'm like, what is going on over here? And I'm part of it now
Mm-hmm.
because I
Yeah,
like you, and now I'm part of it. And I'm getting caught up in all this stuff,
yeah,
that's going on in your own personal life, but because I care and I want to be part. And then I think what happens is, I start looking at myself like, oh, maybe then I'm the savior,
yeah,
that I can come in now and fix her life
yeah,
because man, she's got it all jacked up over here on this side.
yeah,
So let me come in on my white horse and
yeah.
and try to fix things. And that is not
And
what I
that,
can't. But don't do that.
yes,
But I think it's probably a natural thing to want to do because all I
mm-hmm.
want to do is fix,
Sure, as a
so
man,
yeah,
just
that
as a
we're so that
man.
we're better and you don't have to
Yeah,
deal with this stuff.
yeah,
And then in doing with that, Norma would say, well, this guy, this family member, or this person, and then all of a sudden I find myself, well, I don't like her or him either,
yeah,
and now and as the years progress, we got this just chaotic mess of a relationship
mm-hmm.
and extended family. And my family just kind of stood out of it. They didn't really do, I mean, we didn't really have any issues so much with my side, but
No,
not because that's just the way it
your
was.
family. Well, your dad took me under because at 14 or 15, he was a therapist.
Yes.
So I started seeing him, and so he helped me a lot before even you and I really got into a relationship. So I started seeing him as a therapist, for help.
Yeah, and that was kind of weird too. Like, yeah, that was as I look back now, the whole combination, like there were just
Yeah,
some decisions made on, even from my dad, like I don't know that was the best idea. I get again.
he just
Um,
seen me, and that's who he is, and just that's how God made him. He saw a
yeah,
need and he met it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I don't know where I would be if it wasn't for him. God ultimately, but if it wasn't for your dad to come and counsel me and help me through the mess I was going through. As children, when you know that when you go through stuff as kids, you're not aware of what just happened to you. One, you can feel like, oh, that's normal. It's not a big deal. But as you get older, you start acting funny. You start acting weird and like, what's going on with me? Why do I feel this way? And your dad helped me a lot to see why. So I wasn't possessed. I wasn't crazy. I grew up in a lot of trauma. So my actions, my react, whatever you want to call them, it didn't come out till I was about 16,
Yeah.
15, 16, where I'm like, what happened to me as a child? Because when you're a child going through it, it's normal. You're just trying to survive, just live it. Like, oh, this happens at night, or this, whatever took place is just something you roll with, but it doesn't affect you until you get a little older. And I would even say starting at 14 or 15 or 16, but even older, when you're 30,
Well, yeah,
things
yeah,
can start, but
exactly.
that's for another time. But
Yeah,
yeah,
so that came, as they say, we all bring our baggage into a relationship, and we
it's
certainly
true.
did,
It's true.
both of us, into our relationship as kids, and then, we ultimately got married young, still as kids,
Yep.
and then all that stuff comes with it, and then
Mhm.
it just starts to grow and get bigger and bigger. So
Yeah.
yeah, there was that, and I think again, all I remember a lot is that I was, in my mind, I'm trying to see how do I make all this work as a 17-year-old kid,
Yeah.
and thinking I can fix it when I can't.
Yeah.
So anyways, I think we're going to bring this portion to a close here, and next episode we will start diving into a little bit more stuff,
Yeah.
but we wanted to give you just a quick nutshell of who we are, kind of where we came from a little bit, and then maybe we can share a little bit more stories. Well, we definitely will share more
Yeah,
stories
for sure.
with you guys. But I'll say this again, man, I hope you watch it. I hope you guys get a little bit out of what you heard today, and we'll definitely get into more stuff, and I'm sure we'll have some definitely interesting topics. Probably need the tissue box here starting the next episodes.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, that this is going to be some talking that we've never done. Like, we'll probably
Together.
we'll
Yeah.
probably share some stuff that
Well, yeah, you just shared something that you
I
never
did.
told me
Yeah,
before.
I
So
did share,
yeah.
but it'd probably be a healing process for us too. As we're doing this, it's also doing a healing process for ourselves, because again,
Yeah.
we're not there. We just made a decision to be real.
Yes.
We want to share our testimony and not be afraid of our testimony or our stories, however you want to call it. Testimony is a church term.
Yeah.
Our stories, we want to share them with anybody out there. So
Yeah, and you don't have to be Christian. You cannot be a
yes.
Christian and still receive, because life, it's just life. Whether you're a Christian or not, it's never perfect.
Yeah. So I'll share this again. Like I told you, my dad was a heroin addict for 20 years. He was a convict for 9 years, locked up in prisons, different prisons, a gang member, violence, drugs, the whole thing. He did it all, and he had some wild stories of his own to share. And he took some of those to the grave that he never even shared with us.
Yeah.
But when my dad died at 65, I remember he took me and my brothers, and we're preparing for his funeral, and he's kind of telling us how to plan it. He's planning it himself, with telling me and my brothers what to do. And I'll never forget that, in all of his life and all the things that he went through, done and did, he said, you know what? He goes, when I die, when you bury me, he goes, make sure, he goes, do two things. He says, make sure and tell everybody that Jesus Christ was the best thing that ever happened to him. Mm-hmm. And so for you, there's this old song that we used to sing, and it says, if you've tried everything and everything has failed in your life, try Jesus.